all pipelines, they have to inspect the surface of the right-of-way 26 times a year, not to exceed once every 3 weeks. It has to initially be buried at a depth of 4 feet if it crosses a water body that's more than 100 feet in width. And it has to be buried to 4 feet when it's constructed. There's no requirement that it remain buried to any particular depth. And so that's one of the challenges of dealing with river crossing issues and situations like the Yellowstone breach, where flooding and river scour took out the Silvertip line and probably took out the Bridger pipeline this winter with ice scour under the ice. So are there high consequence areas here? I pulled up a map a little bit north of here, also of the same Enbridge right-of-way with 4 lines in it. There are high consequence areas here. The only ones I can show you are these that are the green areas on the map there, that show areas of other populated areas. So the regulations speak to highly populated areas and other populated areas, and these qualify as other populated areas. The unusually sensitive areas, as I mentioned, there are things like public drinking water supplies, endangered species habitat, small cities, other qualifying wildlife areas, and I keep saying that, and it's sort of vague, and I know it sounds vague, and it's because the regulations require very specific designations of those wildlife areas. They have to be really, really special, really, really rare habitats, or flyway sort of gatherings. Thank you. HCAs matter because that's where integrity management rules kick in. And while the integrity management rules aren't perfect, they are, as it were, better than nothing. It requires a full risk assessment of those areas of the pipeline and a management plan to manage all of the risks that are identified that might threaten the pipeline. Whether those risks are physical from land movement or river scour, or whether they're from a high likelihood of being dug up by an excavator or something else. The operators are responsible for identifying those risks and managing to avoid damage to the high consequence area from those risks. They also have to do regular assessments of those lines. That's usually done by smart pigs, these robot things that run through the lines and can identify dense corrosion, other sorts of weld problems and so forth. And as I said, they have to manage the risks so as to avoid harm to the high consequence areas. That includes preventive and mitigative measures like adding additional valves, like putting in automatic or remote control valves, and public education processes to make sure people know the pipeline's there and don't dig into it. So one of the reasons that Exxon, which is the operator of the Silvertip line that runs through in Yellowstone, was fined, was because of their lack of a risk assessment of the risk of river scour in that particular river. And they not only failed to do that, but they've actually now taken the position in appealing that fine that they didn't think such a risk assessment was necessary. It hadn't dug up the pipeline before by the flood, and so that somehow they think that means they didn't need to assess that risk. PHMSA is not, hasn't ruled yet on that argument. It'll be interesting to see what they say. The depth of cover rule, requiring 4 feet of depth, that construction doesn't protect the pipeline or the resources long-term after construction. It's simply a construction requirement. So after Silvertip and after PHMSA decided to find Exxon based on their lack of a risk assessment of flooding and river scour, protecting the resources long-term is going to require that PHMSA start identifying those inadequate risk assessments before there's an incident, before the river floods and dig up the pipeline. I mentioned in the beginning that we have concerns about the quality of inspections, and this is one example. PHMSA actually did an integrity management inspection on the Silvertip operation less than a year before the Yellowstone spill. They didn't identify at that time that there was a problem with their risk assessment. And so it's clear that there was one, and that they didn't find it, and that their failure to find it really contributed to the failure and the spill into the Yellowstone. So those sorts of inspections need to start identifying those weaknesses before the incidents happen. We'd also like to see expansion of the areas that are subject to integrity management rules. PHMSA has been working on major rulemaking both on the gas side and on the liquid side for 4 years. They issued an advance notice of rulemaking 4 years ago. It has been bouncing back and forth between the Department of Transportation and OMB Balanced Management Budget because they all have to go through cost-benefit analyses. For 4 years, they haven't even issued the proposed rule yet to make it subject to another round of public comment. But one of the things that we're strongly hoping in there is that the areas subject to integrity management will be expanded. We'd like to see transparency of the designations of high consequence areas and the reasons that those areas have been designated, whether it's based on particular drinking water supply or so forth. It's important that local governments know that that the operators are aware of the risks to their community and manage it for them. I'm out of time, so I'm going to go fast. Our other suggestions for the community here are to share any studies that you may be aware of, whether they are flood studies, hydrology studies, bird migration studies, native species designations, any of that stuff. Make sure you're sharing it with Enbridge so they know it, because that's how they are obligated to make those designations with high consequence areas. Make sure you share them with PHMSA so that they know whether Enbridge is responding appropriately. Ask both PHMSA and Enbridge about additional valves. Ask them about automatic valves. I'm not going to presume what they'll respond to you, but I think it's important that they know you care. Engage with your LAPC, that's your local emergency planning committee, and every community is supposed to have one at some level, and they are responsible for planning for what happens in an emergency in that community, whether it's a county or regional or city LAPC. Find out who's got air quality monitors that will be able to measure air quality both on a grab sample and a long-term exposure basis. In the Marshall spill, getting those monitors was a real issue for about a day and a half, 2 days after the spill. And it's really important that communities prepare for having those monitors available. Not everybody needs one, but you need to know where they are and how to get them fast. And also working with your first responders to make sure that they are aware of the pipelines and what's being carried in them. At the state level, as I mentioned, Wisconsin could seek to get certified to regulate hazardous liquid lines, intrastate hazardous liquid lines. They could also adopt a statute requiring state-level spill response planning. There are several states in the country that have done this under the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. That's the part of the Clean Water Act that was passed after the Exxon Valdez spill in 1990. It requires certain spill response equipment caches and response within a certain number of hours, and so forth. The state can have stronger and different requirements than the federal spill response regulations. There were some political realities about getting that kind of legislation passed, but just last year, the state of New Hampshire adopted new spill response planning requirements, and they're going through rulemaking now. So it can happen, and we certainly encourage more states to do that. One of the reasons is that states can make those plans publicly available if they choose to under their Public Records Act. The state of Washington does. We can get unredacted spill response plans for Washington pipelines from the Department of Ecology in a day and a half. It takes us about 4 months to get a redacted copy of the same plan from those. Emergency planning and zoning for pipelines and associated facilities, and I think the gentleman from Madison probably talked about zoning, but so I'm not going to go into that except to say that local governments can't have jurisdiction over regulated pipelines, interstate gas pipelines, but you can zone for other pipelines. And that's all. But I do want to say before I quit that I brought a bunch of newsletters and a bunch of index cards that have links to Landowner's Guide and Local Government Guide to Pipeline, 2 separate publications that we've put out in the last 3 years. There are links to those and also our address on those cards if you want to contact us and get hard copies of those. We're happy to mail them out at no cost. With that, I'm happy to take questions, and thank you for your patience in waiting for me.
Thank you, Rebecca. We have a lot of really good questions. If you have additional questions that have not been handed in yet, hold your card up and somebody will collect it for you. We're going to start with one that I'm actually going to answer myself, which is why are we having this meeting when this project is a done deal, or is it not? And the big reason that we started talking with Washington County in particular was it seemed like Pipeline 61 expansion was occurring and nobody was aware. And we really felt it was important that folks, especially first responders, are aware of what's going on with the pipeline and are better prepared than they would have been without. So there's a lot longer answer to that question, but that's the short answer. The second one, actually somebody submitted 4 questions, and I'm going to only use one of the 4. But why isn't Washburn County Board represented at this meeting? Is there somebody here from Washburn County Board? So you are being represented here. We didn't ask you to be on board, or maybe you were involved in the conversation early on, but I think that as the meeting evolved, it was just decided that if they wanted people who had information to share be up here, as opposed to putting the Washington County Board on the spot to ask them questions they may or may not have answers to. If you have questions specifically to them, or if you have something specific you'd like to say at the end, we welcome you to the mic. So with that, I'm going to start with a fairly short question. How long have the oil sands been transported in Wisconsin? They may have been touched on briefly, but do you want to take that one?
Yeah, was it in my presentation? Enbridge has been transporting products derived from northern Alberta or the oil sands region for in the neighborhood of 40, 45 years.
Thank you. This one is probably going to go to all four of you, maybe. So the fact that this meeting is being held after the fact again seems like it's a big failure on our part to alert the public before the fact. What can be done to ensure the public has a better idea of what's happening in their area? So how can we all ensure that we're paying better attention? So do you want to start way at the end, Patrick?
Well, in Dane County, Elizabeth referenced that there were several counties that did pass a resolution asking DNR to hold more public hearings on some of the permitting that was done, and I believe part of that resolution also asked for an environmental impact statement. So that was one effort the Dane County Board made in raising the level of awareness from our standpoint, and I have to give credit to the groups like Sierra Club and Madison 350, very active in our area and alerting folks to what the plans were.
I don't want anybody to feel too guilty because you, the DNR, I mean, that's part of their job, right, is to collect public input and make people aware of what's happening and what decisions are being made. And potentially there may have been more of that had the DNR decided to do a full environmental impact statement. And I appreciate Enbridge being here. I've been with them a couple of times at these things, so I think it's really helpful and important for them to continue reaching out to the communities. But I think it's unfortunate that we're in this situation, but you do just have to do your research and pay attention. And I'm thankful. I think the first article that happened in this region was probably Craig's SC360 article. And I mean, just keep paying attention. We have people who set up Google alerts. Landowners are the ones who have been alerting us the most about things like Line 66, or what we believe is Line 66, but the new pipeline coming down the path. And I don't think it's an accident that this has been the case that people aren't aware of what's going on. We have landowners who were who we've talked to who were under the impression they had natural gas pipelines and had no idea it was a tar sands pipeline. I remember the first zoning committee hearing, and this is not to insult the staff person at all, but the staff person didn't actually realize there were 4 pipelines that went through Dane County at that point. Like I said, it's not, I don't think, an accident, but it's really important that everybody calls on the state and local people that are in charge of protecting us to know the information and to make everybody aware of it. And forums like this are a perfect way to do that.
I answered a couple of ways. One, for new pipelines and replacements of pipelines, states can adopt legislation requiring a full-scale state permit for the comprehensive pipeline. I don't believe Wisconsin does that. I think the DNR permits are somewhat more limited. So that's one thing that Wisconsin could do. The other thing is that Enbridge has an existing obligation under the pipeline safety statutes to have a public awareness program, and they are supposed to reach landowners, local government officials, excavators, and first responders. And so there really should not be a gap in information, at least as among those 4 groups, because they have an obligation to provide information on a regular basis to those 4 groups. In addition to that, they have an obligation to maintain liaison with fire and first responders in the areas where they operate. So there are some existing requirements, and I will grant them. It's very difficult to get people to read things that come in the mail, and so the usefulness of those programs is sometimes hard to identify, but there is an obligation on their part to make that information available. It's very difficult to figure out whether or not people are reading it.
And then from Enbridge's point of view, follow all the statutes and the required steps, you know, for when projects come out or the annual notifications that are required, dealing with landowners, first responders. But always, I think forums like this are great. We're always glad to accommodate requests for information, and we really want to be part of the conversation and make sure everybody's well informed.
So there were a series of questions actually concerned about the depth of the pipeline, specifically the Tatogatech. There must be a lot of local folks here tonight, and it has been written multiple times that under the Tatogatech it's only buried 2 feet, and we spoke to the 4-foot need, I think, for the wider rivers. And Tatogatech and many of our rivers, especially in this part of the world, are fairly narrow. How can we get a depth of cover at crossings maintained is the question. So, you want to start?
No, which one was you looking at?
Me? Yeah, and I don't know if Rebecca knows the regulations well enough. I mean, we, like she had mentioned, upon installation, it's important to get a certain depth with the installation of the pipeline. But there's not an ongoing requirement that it be a given length, you know, as conditions change where it's been installed. So we have a program in place where we are monitoring that. I think, you know, period, I'm not sure what the regulations call for, but as a result of our own incident and I think the ones on the Yellowstone, we've as a company stepped up our game and improved our inspection process for river crossings. I know every year we inspect the banks, the depth of the crossing. Changes in the river, that's a big flag to us, because that's usually where you're going to have problems, is if the river itself is changing. And we'll measure the depth of cover over the pipe and the depth of the water. We actively monitor flooding, which is the greatest potential for concern, or cause for concern. And we've actually got consultants on retainer that actively monitor rainfall and flood events, and will give us a call to actually go out and take a look at what's happening on that river should there be a flood event. So we are going above and beyond. As far as, you know, are we going to start a program of going out and actively lowering pipelines depending on what we find? I mean, that's going to be a risk-based decision.
Anybody else want to talk about that one?
Well, yeah, I'll just add on to what I did mention, which is if, I don't know where that crossing is or what might be around it, but if it is in an area where a rupture there could affect a high consequence area, it does kick in the integrity management rules, which require that there be a risk assessment for risks that would affect the pipeline, which would include flooding and river crossing. So it sounds like Enbridge is treating those crossings that way, but that's where you're going to get the protection. The problem is, in terms of enforcing that rule, it's very difficult to do so beforehand because you get into a risk-based analysis argument between the operator and the regulator, and if something hasn't happened, then it's difficult to say that it's going to. So it's a challenge not having a prescriptive rule that says you have to keep it, 10 feet deeper than any scour study says it's ever going to go. We don't have that kind of rule. We have risk-based, performance-based rules, which are challenging to enforce before incidents occur.
I would just add that coming from soil and water conservation, having seen the 500-year flood in 93, 98, 2003, 2008 has changed what we maybe need to look at. So, I mean, as we move forward with the changing weather conditions, I think that part of the dialogue is critical, that everybody continues to have the dialogue and really look at what we need to do as we move forward. This one is specifically for Patrick Miles, and I think this is probably from an elected official. How does additional insurance protect Dade County?
The idea of insurance, just like any common insurance for your home or auto, is to make sure there are financial resources available to address an accident. So if there is a spill, what we looked at was, is there an appropriate type of insurance coverage to clean up an oil spill? And like I said in my remarks, the types of coverage and some of the terms around insurance was a little bit more complex than committee had anticipated, and that's why we decided to hire an outside consultant that could provide an objective viewpoint and assessment of Enbridge's existing policies and what types of policies might provide some insurance if there are gaps in what Enbridge had on hand. So, but primarily it's to address an after-the-fact incident if there's a spill, and say Enbridge is not in a financial position to address the cleanup of that spill, that there is some means to pay for this cleanup.
Next one, actually, there's a series of questions related to if there should be a spill. But I've chosen just a couple of them. The first one is, do you have personnel located in the area to respond to an emergency? So should there be a break, what happens?
Yes, we have some local technicians that live, I think there's 2 or 3 employees that live in the Hayward area. I don't know their addresses, but I know they work in the pump stations nearby. And then, so they would be our first Enbridge personnel on site. And then we have a large group of employees in Superior that would also be deployed immediately.
Next one, I'm not, it's a twofold question. How hot is crude in pipelines? Will Enbridge provide safety route escapes across from the pumping station if a spill or break should occur? Maybe I should stop there and pause, because the other one I've never heard anything about. I'm interested. So let's pause there. I'll read the second half of the question.
Okay, temperature of the crude is, I want to say around 60, 65 degrees year round. It doesn't change throughout the year. And then escape route was part of it?
Yeah, if there should be a spill, is there a route for escape? You happen to be there, a pumping station or something else?
Okay. What would typically happen in a spill where people are concerned about getting from one point to another is the local first responders would be activated and assigned to help people safely exit their homes. Typically it'd be the sheriff and local fire department, but we assist them in that and providing them information on the product and gas monitoring and wind direction. These are all part of our emergency response training.
The second half of this one has to do with noise, and I've not heard a lot of comment from, or read a whole lot about noise. What is Enbridge going to do to mitigate the noise of pump operations and the light pollution in wilderness areas? So here we have significant wilderness light area.
Right, and a lot of the facilities are at pre-existing Enbridge sites. So if we're adding a pumping station, there was already one there. People are going to be familiar with what it looks like and sounds like. There are some new ones along the way. The sound, from what some folks have described it to me, is if at a distance of say 300 yards, it would be in the neighborhood of 40 decibels, which is something like the hum of a refrigerator. far as light, we do for security reasons like to have our pump stations lit. Typically, they're pointed downwards, so as not to shine out towards the public or towards the surrounding area, but to light the facility itself for security reasons.
Anybody else want to answer that?
Well, I think you can only say that in terms of our conditions that we required Enbridge to shroud the lights and to reduce the light pollution onto adjoining properties, and then to basically give them performance standards, maximum 50 decibels on the property line. How they get to that is up to them, but if they were to be in excess of that volume at the property line and was a complaint, it would be seen as a violation of the permit and you'd have to correct it.
So here's another one I had not read anything about. I've read scientific papers about serious corrosion issues that arise when pipelines are sited beside high voltage transmission lines. Should we be concerned about that problem with line 61? Why or why not?
I'll answer that. Probably not. I'd go so far as to say no, because we have experts in what's called cathodic protection. Their entire job is to monitor the voltages and corrosion along our pipeline system, specifically in areas where there's transmission lines, and they have a lot of experience in dealing with that. That's something we actively monitor and mitigate.
I'll just add to that. There is a fair amount of story around electrical transmission lines, and as he mentions, there are cathodic protection systems. They need to be constantly managed and monitored to protect the line from that high voltage. The flip side of that question is whether pipelines should be sited in the first place near those lines. Some people really like to consolidate the utility corridors because it reduces the number of landowners that are affected by various condemnation proceedings. Other people prefer that they be spread out. Those conversations tend to be dominated by whether you're a landowner there or not. But there are successful locations, co-locations